Hey, all right, welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to be creating a weather app. It's going to be a very simple weather app. In the top right corner, you're going to get a search bar, and you get to type in either a city name or a zip code. And if you do that, say we type in New York, and we search, we get weather information about New York. We get the name of the city, the temperature, along with weather information and an icon that accompanies that. And then on the bottom, we get some basic weather details that includes the wind and the humidity levels. And the background image is always going to match the weather. So this is New York. Let's look at something else. Let's say Portland. Portland's cloudy, so you get the cloudy background. Let's try Dubai. And you get the clear sky for that. So all of these images are going to be free and available on a website called Pexels, P-E-X-E-L-S.com. I'm going to be giving you links to every single one of these images along with the image name. So if you look over here in the sidebar here where my mouse is, you can see that I'm naming them storm, snow, rain, default, cloudy, and clear. And just so you know what default is, it's just this image right here when you first open up the app. So you're going to want to download all of the images that I put in the description, and then you're going to want to name them exactly like they are here in the bar over here, okay? And once you're done with that, we can move to the next step. So go ahead, pause the video, go do that, and then resume the video. Now I'm going to assume that you're done with that. The next step is going to be you're going to want to go to openweathermap.org. I'm going to put a link to that in the description as well. You're going to want to create a free account, and you create an account there. And once you have created your account, in the top right hand side here, you're going to see your username. Click that. It's going to open up the settings, and then you're going to want to click API keys right here, and then right here you're going to see your API key. Keep this window open and to the side because we are going to use this API key in our app. You need this in order to authenticate your app. So we're gonna be using Open Weather Map, which is a basic, very simple, free API for getting weather information. So that is that, and it gives us interesting things such as icons and just basic weather information. And we're gonna go through all of that in just a moment. Okay. So if you have an account ready and you have all the images in your project folder, we're going to go ahead and get started right now on the app, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and delete my index.html, script.js, and style files. Cool. So now if I refresh the app, I get nothing. So we get to start from scratch together. So index.html, and I'm going to, I spelled that incorrectly. So you're going to want to create an index.html file, a style.css file, and a script.js file. Great. So in the index.html file, we're going to go ahead and create the skeleton for our project. So in here, go ahead and create your HTML tags, your header tags, and then in here we're going to link to our CSS file. Yeah, that's right. And the href is going to be style.css because that is what we named the file right here. And then we are going to create body tags. And then at the bottom of the body tags, we're going to create script tags. And we're just going to say source is equal to script.js because that is what we named the file. All right, so now that we have our CSS file and our JavaScript file imported, let's go ahead and write our HTML, okay? So here above because you make sure you put the script tag at the very, very bottom of the body. It's very important. Don't put it outside of the body, put it at the bottom of the body, just like it is here, okay? Great, so let's go ahead and create our first div. The ID for this is going to be search container. And this is going to contain the search input and the search button that you saw in the top right corner over here. So we're going to go ahead and put an input in there. And it's going to be of type text. We're going to put a placeholder, which is going to be text that appears inside of the text input before you start to type in it so that the user kind of knows what it is they're supposed to be putting into that input. And here we're going to say city name or zip code. And we're going to be kind of we're going to write a little bit of code to guess whether or not they're writing a zip code or a city name. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. So we're going to want to put an ID of search input and a class here at the beginning. We're just going to call it search control. All right. Then under that, create a button. And the text for the button is just going to be search. And we're going to also want to give it that same class of search control. And then the ID is going to be search button. All right. So now we have our little search container that we're going to put in the top right corner. Below that, we're going to go ahead and create our weather container, which is going to be that little container that holds all of the weather information. Okay. So ID is weather container. And then inside of this, we're going to, I think I capitalized the O by accident. We don't want to do that. So create another div, and this is going to be the weather description. So weather description. And inside of here, we're going to want a header tag. And that's going to contain the name of the city. So we're going to put an ID here, and we're going to call it city header. All right, and we're going to populate that with information that we get from the server, so we'll leave it blank for now. And then we're going to put a div underneath of this, and we're going to give this an ID of weather main. And this is going to, oops, I should probably put an equal sign. So ID equals weather main. There we go. And this is what's going to contain our temperature, our weather description, and our icon. So let's go ahead and put here the first element that is going to go inside of there, which is going to be the temperature. And again, we're getting that from the server, so we're going to leave that empty for now. Create another div. This ID will be the weather description header. Okay. And again, we're getting that from the server, so we're going to leave that empty. And then we're going to create just an empty div, or a div with no ID. And then on the inside of it, we're going to create an image tag. And this is going to be our icon. And we're going to give it an ID of document icon image. So document icon, I'm going to say img just for short. And then we are going to populate the source attribute of that dynamically from the information that we get from the server. And then the very last two things is outside of this weather main, outside of the weather main div, we're going to want to put a horizontal row tag, which we're going to use to just have like a little visual separation between the main information and then the smaller details of the weather. So let's go ahead and get those smaller detail put into here. So the ID is going to be wind speed for this one. And then we're going to give it a class of bottom details. And then under that div, we're just going to create one more, and that's going to be ID of humidity. And the class is going to be bottom details. All right, so we are officially done with the HTML, and go ahead and save everything in here. Go ahead and remove any empty spaces if you want to do that, and save it. Let's go ahead and move over to our JavaScript file. Now, what I'm going to be doing in this tutorial is I'm using Google Chrome, and as I'm using Google Chrome, I'm going to be using the console. So right-click in here if you're using Google Chrome. If you're using Firefox, it's pretty similar. Just right-click inside of here, click console, open up your console here so that we can debug as we go. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this page so you can see what we have so far. So far we just have the input, the search, and then this is the horizontal row and all of that we created earlier. So the first thing that we're going to want to create at the top of the JavaScript file is the app ID variable. And we're going to say let app ID equal, and then in quotes, you're going to want to go back to where you had your API key, and you're going to want to copy that and paste it into the string here. So let app ID equal your app ID, and make sure it's yours and not mine because I'm going to delete mine. So the next thing that we're going to add is the units, and Depending on where you live, you may want to use either imperial or metric. And metric is the metric system, and imperial is going to be things like Fahrenheit, which is what I'm going to be using in this. And so metric would be Celsius. So if you're used to Celsius, put metric in here. I'm going to put imperial, okay? Then we're going to create a empty variable called search method. And search method is either going to be zip, which is going to be for zip code, which here in the United States we use zip codes. And if you want to use the city name, the search method is literally going to be the letter Q. And I'll explain what that is in just a minute. You don't have to worry about that. Don't worry about it if you don't understand that right now. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a function, and we're going to call it search weather. Let me spell it right. Search weather. And we're going to put in a search term for the argument. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use the fetch API. So the way that this works is the first thing, the first argument is going to be the URL for the call that we're going to be making to the API. So the first argument is the URL that we're going to call in order to get our information from the API. The second thing, well, actually, that's the only argument for this function. So I'm not trying to confuse you here. Let's go ahead and find this URL. I'm actually going to paste it into the description, but I recommend you try to find it on your own as well, so you can get experience kind of going around the documentation on the API, so that you can actually work on your own apps with APIs and be somewhat familiar with it. So on this link right here, if you scroll down, you'll see some example API calls, and the URL that they're using right here is basically what we're going to be using. But as you can see here, this already has pre-populated London into it, and we're not going to do that, but let's just go ahead and grab that and come over here, and I'm going to put http:// and then I'm going to paste in what we have, and I'm just going to delete all the way till there, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to be populating our own query parameters into the URL. So replace the quotation marks that you have here with the backticks, little backticks like this, because we're going to be using the backticks. You can actually inject JavaScript into these strings if you use the backticks, and I'll show you exactly how we're going to do that. So the first parameter that we're going to be doing is the search method. So in order to inject JavaScript into one of these strings, you put a $, and then in between two curly braces, you put the JavaScript in there. In our case, we're going to want search method, this variable right here, to be there. Great. So we're going to say search method is equal to, and then we're going to have another variable, which we have right here, search term. So search method is equal to search term. So search method is either going to be Q or zip. So this is going to be either Q or zip. In the example that we copied over here, it's Q, because they're looking for a city name. And in this case, it's going to say Q is equal to whatever city we are searching for. Okay. Now we are going to add an and. And that little and symbol is going to separate each query parameter. So if we want to have a bunch of query parameters, it's going to be the parameter name equals the value, and then the and symbol, and then you're just going to keep adding new ones. In our case here, we want to go ahead and type in app ID equals, and then again the $, with the curly braces, and in here we're going to put app ID, the variable, so that the parameter is called app ID, and we're going to set it equal to the app ID that we have set right up here. And the third and final parameter that we're going to be doing in this tutorial, go ahead and put your and symbol, is units. So and units equals, and then go ahead and put your $, in your curly braces, and inside of there type in units, because we have the variable units right here. So whatever you set units to, it's going to have that in the URL. All right, so that is going to be your URL. Now, the way that the fetch function is going to work is it's going to go out, it's going to call to the API, and the API is going to return some JSON, which is JavaScript object notation. It's going to return that, but we don't want to execute any code until we receive that JSON, because if you think about it, if you just were to move on with the code, it's going to move a lot faster than it's going to receive the information, because it's going to take, a second or so for it to go all the way out to the weather map server, and then the server sends the information all the way back. You want to wait until you get the information before you move on. So there's a function called then. So you put .then. And in here, you're going to put result. And basically, it's going to send the information back, and result is going to be that information that you get from the server. So it's actually a function that's going to get called when you receive information from the server. That's what you put inside of then. So result is the information itself. Then you put the arrow sign, and then you put 2 curly braces because you're inside of a function now. And in this particular case, we're going to return result.json, which converts the response, the HTTP response, into a JSON element that we can actually work with. So we're going to chain two then functions. The first one, .then result equals the function return result.json. Then after that one here, we're going to say .then again. Goodness. And we're going to put result and do the exact same thing, result, arrow sign, and then inside of these braces, we're going to have a function called init. And we're going to, whoa, we shouldn't do that. Here, let's go ahead and write the function out so that it doesn't try to autofill. Let's just say function init, and it's going to, expect, we're going to call this result from server. Okay, so now we can reference init here. So init, pass result to that, okay? So really quickly, just a quick overview. We're calling this URL that we're building here using the variables that we've set up here, and the search term. And then we're waiting for information from the server. We're converting it to JSON. And then when that is done, we're calling it init with the result from the server. Great. So now I hope that makes perfect sense. So what does that information look like? Let's go ahead and log it. So in here, I'm going to just create a log statement, and I'm going to log result from server. So if we go in here and I just refresh, right now it would be best. So I'm going to just up here at the top, I'm going to go ahead and set this to Q, or actually, I'm sorry, zip right now, so that I can actually demonstrate some searching here. We're actually going to set this dynamically in just a moment. We'll actually get that. That'll be the next step. So I'm going to type in a zip code here. We're going to say, let's do 90210. That should be Beverly Hills. We have not yet set the, we got to hook up the search button first really quick. Okay, let's hook up the search button, and then we will do this. So let's say document.get element by ID, and the ID of the search button was search btn, and then we're going to say .add event listener. The event listener is going to be of type click, and we're going to pass a function to it here. And inside of this, we're just going to say let search term equal, and we want to set this equal to whatever's inside of the search input value, or search input box. So we're going to grab that text by saying document.get element by ID. We called that input search input, and we're just going to grab the value from that. So now we have the search term in a variable called search term, and now we're just going to say if search term exists. So if search term, call search weather with search term. Okay, so now I should be able to type in 90210 over here and click search and actually get a response from the server. So when I break this down, you can see what this JSON object actually looks like. The stuff that we're going to be using is inside of main, because it gives us humidity, it gives us the temperature. We're going to be rounding the temperature because a lot of the times when people use apps like this, they're not going to want to know that it's 72.46 degrees outside. They'll just be fine with 72 degrees. So we're going to round that. We're going to use name because that's the name of the city. And then we're going to access this weather. And in here, it is actually going to return an array of weather items. We're really only going to be using the first one that gets returned. And in this case, it's apparently hazy there. So it's probably, it would appear as if it was kind of rainy. And then we're going to also access the wind portion of this JSON object. And we're going to use speed, and we're also going to round the speed. So I think I addressed all of the things that we're going to be using in here. And if you want to, at the end of this tutorial, extend this app to use all of the information, go for it. All right, so now you've seen what the information looks like. Let's go ahead and quickly, just while we're here, create a function that determines whether or not they're entering a zip code or a city name. Now, this is not foolproof, but it's going to work for us. We're going to create a function called function get search method, and we're going to pass in the search term to this function. And what we're going to do is we're going to assume that if, let's write it out as I do it. So if search term dot length is equal to 5, because the zip code is 5 digits long. So if it's equal to 5, the length, and number dot parse int search term is equal to, or actually, I'm sorry, plus an empty string. So in JavaScript, you can actually take a number and say plus an empty string to literally convert the number into a string. So what I'm doing here is say if that is equal to search term itself. So what I'm checking here is I'm checking to see if the length of search term is 5, and if you were to, basically this is a way of saying every single item inside of the search term is a number. Because if you were to parse out, say you typed in 321 apple, if you did number.parseInt 321 apple, it would just return 321. And if you turned 321 into a string and compared it to 321 apple, it would not be the same. So we know for a fact that not every single item inside of search term was a number. But if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you did number.parseInt on that, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you turn it into a string and compare it to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as a string, and they are equal. So you know that if the length is 5, we have something that could be considered a zip code. Okay? So if that returns true, search method is going to be equal to zip. And then we're just going to say else search method is equal to q. And so I'm going to go back up here to my search method and delete this so that it's just, an empty variable. And now if we refresh here and I type in, let's just say New York, we should get information on New York. Let's see what we did wrong here. Okay, so I'm probably rushing here. I need to actually call the method. So we haven't called the method yet. So we're going to want to call the method. That's the first thing we want to do in the search weather function is call get search method. So now we actually have the method getting called. And so now I can type in New York and click search, and property length of undefined. It's probably because I need to actually pass the search term into the method. Try it one more time. Click search, and yet again, see what the problem is here. Line 6, we have if search term dot length. So this is saying that search term is undefined, and that's because I'm passing search method. Gosh, I'm sorry, guys. So get search method, I should be passing search term into it. I was accidentally passing search method into it. So let's refresh, type in New York, click search. I'm looking at the URL really quick and seeing what's going wrong here. My little video's in the way. Get out of the way. All right, so and it's because I'm not logging it. So it did go through, but I forgot to continue logging our result because I'm being silly. So now refresh one more time, type in New York, search, and now as you can see, we do get weather information for New York. Now let's try doing it with a zip code, 10001, click search, and again, New York, because that is a zip code for New York. So we are in working order here. Sorry about that mishap. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. So let's go ahead and go inside of the init function and let's start parsing this JSON and kind of figuring out what to do with it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to want to set the background based on the weather that we receive. So we're going to use a switch statement, and the way that this works is whatever is inside of this part of the switch statement, let's go ahead and put that in there really quick. Result from server, and we're going to say .weather, the first item of that array, .main. And what this is going to be saying is whatever this is, whatever this is inside of the switch, if it matches whatever is here, do everything inside of this case block. And then we can put multiples of these, and we can just say like, in this particular case, we're going to put clear. So if this is equal to clear, we're going to do all of this. Otherwise, if it is clouds, we're going to do all of this, etc. So let's go ahead and add all of the options that are available with weathermap.org. And as you can see, if you scroll down on this page right here, you see all of the available options, and a lot of these are going to be the same for us. So in a switch statement, if you want to run the same block of code, if there's, so say we want to run the same block of code if it's rain, drizzle, or mist, which we do, all we have to do is kind of do it like this. So we put case rain, click enter, case, and then in quotes we're going to want to say drizzle, again, colon, and then case mist. And then everything inside of this block will get run whether it is rain, drizzle, or mist, okay? So in here, we'll get back to that in just a minute. And then we're gonna want case thunderstorm. And keep in mind, guys, these are case sensitive. You're gonna wanna match the JSON string perfectly. So just follow me, it will be okay. So case snow. So now we're going to go ahead and start with clear and start doing the stuff that we want to do. So what we're going to say is document.body.style.background image is equal to, and we're going to put a URL to the background image here. So if it is clear, we're going to put URL, and then inside of here, make sure it's the other type of quotes. So in this particular case, I'm using single quotes. So inside of here, I want to use double quotes. Just make sure you use the other one. And the name of the image is clear.jpg. So if the weather is clear, we're setting the background image to clear.jpg. Then let's just copy and paste this for all of these. So all we're doing is renaming the image. So. So just rename these appropriately. So in this, it's going to be snow. In this, it's going to be storm. And this is going to be rain. And then here, we're going to call this cloudy. So now let's just quickly test this out and see if this works. If I can get this to be correct, that'd be great. So let's just see if this works. 10001, click search. Not quite. All right, so what happened here? Why is this not? I do have all the background images as expected. Okay, so what happened was it said failed to fetch. So what that means is that I personally have an issue with my URL. And it says name not resolved. So let's refresh. It could have just been a hiccup on the API, or it could be something that I'm doing wrong. It looks like it's something I'm doing wrong. There's no way that it's messing up both times. It could be that I've used my API key too many times, or it could be that I've mistaken. Provisional headers are shown. It shouldn't be the API key. What is going on here? Yeah, it is not working right now. So I'm going to have to, I think it was the server. So it's working now. I think it was the API. So if you experience something like that, just give it a minute. It is a free API, so you're not going to get the best reliability from it. But I think it was just the API. Let's try it with New York. It's the same thing. It's going really slow right now. Dubai. Yeah, their server's going extremely slow right now. Okay, yeah, so that's a clear sky and Portland. Click search. Okay, yeah, that looks like cloudy. So as you can see here, the background image is way too big. We're gonna go into the CSS and fix that. I'm sorry that was going really slow. But anyway, moving on to the next thing here. What we're going to want to do after we do this particular section where we change the background image, we're actually going to want to go ahead and grab all of the IDs. We're going to want to grab all the elements by the ID, and then we're going to want to set the text inside of it appropriately based on the information that we get from the server. So in here, let's go ahead and start by weather. Let weather description header, set that equal to document.get element by ID, and the ID should be exactly the same as weather description header, and hopefully we don't have any typos there. I can kind of take a quick look at it. I'll actually just copy it. Yeah, this is the exact same. Just wanted to be sure. Let temperature element equal document.get element by ID, and then inside of the quotes here we're going to put temperature because that is the ID that we gave that div. Then the next one we're going to want to do is the humidity element is what we're going to call this, document.get element by ID, and then inside of quotes we're going to put humidity. And then the next one is going to be wind speed element equals document.get element by ID, and then in quotes I believe it is wind speed. That is correct. And then we're going to want to get the city header, and that is document.get element by get element by ID. And the ID for that is city header. Okay, let's go ahead and say let weather icon equal document.get element by ID, and that ID is document icon image, so document icon img. And then now we have all of the elements that we need. Let's go ahead and set the weather icon dot source, and before we set that, let me just go back over here and show you, where was it, right here. So it says how to get icon URL. The way that this works is you have a base URL, which is all of this all the way past the w/, and then you have the file name itself. So what we're going to do is inside of the JSON that gets returned from the server, it actually has the image name, and that is the last part of the URL. So what we're going to do is we are going to grab that from the JSON, and we're just going to append that to the URL. So we're going to say weather icon source is equal to, and then just go ahead and copy this, paste that into here, and then just put a plus sign, and then we're going to say result from server, because that is this. So result from server, and the parameter, or the key that we're going to use here is main, and the key inside of main we're going to put let's see, what is it? No, actually it's not main. I apologize. It's result from server dot weather 0, so it's the first item in that weather array, dot icon. And then let's go ahead and add dot png to the end. So now we have the weather icon. And then let's save and just see if we get the weather icon really quick. Let's type in Portland, click search, and we get the weather icon as we hoped. So on to the next thing. Let result from, or result description. So the result description is just going to be the description of the weather from the result from the server. And so we're going to set that equal to result from server, and the key that we're going to use here is going to be dot weather, and again we're going to use the first element inside of that, and we're going to say dot description. So as you can see here, it's pretty simple. We're just taking each thing that we want, and I put two S's here. We're taking each thing that we want from the JSON and we're putting it into our HTML. So now we're going to say weather description header. So the weather description header dot inner text. So we're going to go ahead and set the text for this header now. Let's go ahead and grab it. It's result from server, or actually, I'm sorry, it's result description. Now, if I go ahead and save that and we refresh and I type in again Portland, I do search, you can see that we do in fact get it, but it's kind of ugly. We want the first letter to be uppercase. So what we're going to do is we're just going to write a quick little bit of code that grabs the grabs that and then makes it lower uppercase. Sorry. So back down to our code, result from description, and we're going to say .care at, and you give it an index, and it's grabbing the first character. So care at is care at what index, character of the string at what index, 0 being the very first index, and we want to say dot to uppercase. So we're capitalizing the very first item of the string, and then we're taking that and we're appending it to the rest of the string. And in order to do that, or prepending I should say, in order to do that, we're going to say result description dot slice, and the parameter is where do you want to start slicing the string. So in this case, we already have the first index, which is whatever the first, so in our case here it would be B. We've capitalized B, and now we want to prepend that to Roken Clouds. So we would give the index that we want to start slicing at, and it will automatically grab the rest of the string. So in this case, it's going to be 1, because in arrays, 1 is the second element, and R is where we want to start, and that's the second letter. So let's put a 1 in there. And let's save that and see what it looks like now when we type in Portland. Click search, and you get Broken Clouds with a capital B. All right, next thing here, we're going to say temperature element dot inner. We're going to actually use inner HTML for this. And we're going to say, we're going to go ahead and, like I said, we were going to round it because it was like, the temperature is like 72.11 or something like that. We want to just round that, and I'm going to round it down because it's fine. Math.floor. So math.floor just rounds the number down. So inside of here, we're going to want to put result from server, and the key that we're going to use is .main.temp. So that is going to take the temperature and round it down one to the lowest whole number, or to the lower whole number. And now we want to put the little degree symbol, which is like a tiny little circle that appears above the temperature. So I'll show you what I mean by that, if it's not already obvious enough. That, oh gosh, that little symbol right there is, we're gonna actually use code for that, and we're gonna put an and sign and a number sign 176. So if you put that in there, that's going to represent the symbol that you want for the temperature. Great. Now let's go ahead and get the wind speed. Wind speed element dot inner HTML is equal to result. Let's go ahead and put a string in there. Let's say winds at, give it a little space there so that there's space. Make sure the space is on the inside of the quote, and then add math.floor so that we can, again, math.floor, round the number down to the nearest whole number. Result from server dot main, or actually this is dot wind dot speed. Now the wind dot speed in our API that we're using is going to give this to you in meters per second, and you cannot change that. You can convert it, you can write code that converts it to whatever you want, miles per hour or whatever you prefer. But in our case, we're just going to leave it at meters per second. So you can put m/s to show that that is the unit that is being used in this particular API. So city header dot inner HTML is equal to result from server dot name, and that's just the city name. And then the final one is humidity element dot inner HTML, and we're just gonna say that's equal to, and then we're gonna say humidity levels, levels at, again, leave a little space in between, and go ahead and put in result from server dot main dot humidity. Humidity. Now this is always going to be a whole number because they already round it for you. And just, we want to go ahead and, since this is a percentage, just inside of quotes, add a % at the end. All right, so let's see what happens when we search. Do we get everything we'd expect? Click that. So here we get 61 degrees, broken clouds, the icon, the name of the city, the wind, and the humidity, and that's looking good. All right, so let's go ahead and do the last part of the JavaScript here. In our case, what we want to do is, this is just going to be for positioning purposes. Actually, let's do this after we do the CSS. All that we're going to do in the JavaScript at this point is we want the little box that has all of the weather information to be centered horizontally and vertically, and we're going to do that with JavaScript. So we'll come back to that after we do the CSS, so that it just makes more sense to do it that way. So let's start with the body tag, and inside of the body tag we want to go ahead and set the background image to be our default image that we had. If you remember, that is called default.jpg. So inside of quotes, default.jpg, and just by default we would like to have a default image here. So when I refresh, we get that nice default image. But if you remember, we were having issues because the background image was always really big. Let's go ahead and take care of that. So background size, we're gonna put that to be cover. Background repeat, I'm gonna set that to no repeat. And finally, background position, I'm going to set that to be center, so that it's centered both horizontally and vertically. So now when I save and we look, it's sized much more appropriately. So let's type in Portland and see what that looks like. Cool, so you get the whole image now. It looks a lot better. So we want the color of the font to actually be white throughout the entire body. And all of the white font we want to give a text shadow to. And that is going to be 2 pixels, 1 pixel, black. And what this is this is the distance of the shadow from the text horizontally. This is the distance vertically, and then this is the spread. So then we want to put, and we're going to have a font family of, and in quotes we're going to want to put Palatino linotype, and then a comma. Then in here we're going to put book Antiqua, and then comma Palatino, and then finally serif. Save that, make sure that our font changes as expected. Yep. So we get that nice serif font. All right. So the first thing that we're going to want to target is the weather container. So the background color of that is going to be RGBA, and RGBA lets you put in an RGB value, which is the red, the green, and the blue value, which produces a color, and then the fourth value is alpha, which represents a level of opacity. 0 is completely opaque, 1 is not opaque at all, and anything in between is basically, it's a gradient level of opacity. So we want it to be black, so it's 0, 0, 0, and then the opacity level we're going to set to 0.25. So it's just barely opaque. And the reason why I'm choosing black is because it contrasts well with white. That's the only reason. So then the box shadow is going to be a little shadow that appears underneath it to kind of give it a little bit of depth. It's just going to make it look kind of good. So 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 5 pixels. 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 1 pixel. I meant 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 5 pixels, black. And that is the same as the text shadow concept. Then we're going to put in a padding of 50 pixels, which is the distance between the content and the edge of the container. Then we're going to put border radius of 10 pixels so that the corners are nice and beveled and smooth and rounded. Position is going to be absolute in our case. And the visibility is going to be hidden by default. And the reason why is because when you first load the app, we're not going to have any weather information. So we want this to not be visible at all until you search. And we're going to dynamically make this visible with JavaScript at the same time that we do the positioning. So in here, we're going to do, the next one is weather container. And we want to target the header 1 tag inside of that, give it a margin of 5 pixels, not a margin right, a margin of 5 pixels. A font size of 42 pixels, and we're going to do the font family. So in typography, the headers are typically a different font than the content underneath the header. So the header itself, we're going to give a font family that is different. So here we're going to give it it's Lucida, Lucida Sans Unicode, and then comma Lucida Grande, or Grand, sans serif. So quickly refresh, type in Portland or whatever your city is, and looks like, oh yeah, of course it's not visible at the moment. Delete that really quick just for a second so we can do some testing. All right, that looks as we would expect. So we have a sans serif font for the header and a serif font for the stuff inside. And I'm going to leave visibility hidden out just for now so we can continue to style. I'm going to put that back in at the very end so that we can kind of see what we're doing as we're doing it. So let's go ahead and target the search container. Search container, made sure I spelled it right. And padding is going to be 15 pixels here. Then the position is also going to be absolute here. Absolute. And then we're going to put a top of 0 and a right of 0. And so what this basically means is since it's position absolute, the top of the element is going to be pinned to the top, and the right of the element, the right side of the element, is going to be pinned all the way to the right side of the screen. So it would be in this very top corner, but since we added this 15 pixels, the stuff inside of it will actually be about 15, well, exactly 15 pixels from the edge. So let's refresh as we'd expect. Great. So let's go ahead and target the search container. Let's target the input inside of it and set the width to 200 pixels. And then let's do the same thing, but with the button. Let's say search container and then target the button. And we're going to put the background color of the button. Background color, we're going to use an RGB val. And we are going to set that equal to 159, 198, and it should be a nice blue. So then we'll set the width of that to 75 pixels and then just save it and refresh. And now we get this. But it still kind of looks ugly, so we have a class for both of those, and that class was search control. Now, we want to give each of these a little box shadow since we were giving the this container here a box shadow that gives it a little bit of depth. We want to do the same thing for the controls here just so it matches. So here we're going to put a box shadow, and it's going to be exactly, let's see, box. Yeah, I was hoping I could get there easily. It's going to be 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 5 pixels black. So now both of those will get that. We're going to set the border to none. As you can see here, the button has this sort of gray border that we don't really want there. So we're going to set the border to none. Same with the input. And the border radius is going to be 5 pixels. So it's a little beveled, 5 pixels. And the padding is going to be 5 pixels as well. So let's see what that looks like. Oh, that's way better. That looks a lot better. It's not amazing, but it looks a lot better. All right, so now we're going to do weather main, and we're going to say display is block. And the reason why we want that to be block is because we want the main weather portion to be on its own line. Margin bottom is going to be 20 pixels, and so we want it to be on its own line and everything underneath it to be 20 pixels from it. Then let's go ahead and target the divs inside of weather main. So weather main, target the divs. And what we want to do is set all of the divs inside of it to be inline block because we want it to all be on the same line. So we want the weather main parent container to be on its own line, but we want all the stuff inside of it to be on the same line. So that's what we're doing here. Then we're going to target the weather description header. Okay, and then what we're going to do here is we're going to set the font size to be 28 pixels. And the vertical align to be a 50%. And what that is doing is so the icons that the API sends back to us, there's a little bit of space between the image and the actual edge of the image that it's invisible. Let's see if I can actually show you that right now. I don't want to leave you hanging on that. Click search. All right, so if I highlight this image, you can see that the actual image is this square, and there's a little bit of space between what's inside the image and the actual edge of the image itself. And it's really noticeable on the vertical aspect. Like, see the bottom of the cloud? There's so much space between the bottom of the cloud and the actual edge of the image. And so what you see happening here is this weather description header is, since we added that vertical align to 50%, what's happening is it's aligning itself vertically with this image. And we want it to do that because if we didn't do that, if I take that out and I save it and refresh and type in Portland again, you can see it's aligned to the bottom of the image and it just looks weird. So I'm putting this vertical align in there to make it match up vertically. Now we're going to want to do something similar for the temperature, but it's going to be a little bit different. A little bit different amount since the font size is going to be different. So we're going to put the font size to be 38 pixels and the vertical align to be 25%. So let's just make sure that looks good really quick. Portland. Yeah, that looks great. Okay, so the bottom details, that's the wind and the humidity. The first thing that we're going to want to do is make sure that we put display block so that we know for sure that each item is on its own line. The font size is going to be 24 pixels and the text align is going to be on the right. And then let's go ahead and target the horizontal row as well. All that we want to do is give it a margin bottom of 20 pixels. Refresh that. Let's see what we got here. Type in Portland. All right, so it looks like there is a small issue because the text align should be right. So it might be that we named it bottom details. So it was it's the syntax that I'm using. I'm using the wrong syntax. So bottom details should actually be spelled like that. So let's refresh and try it again. Correct. That's exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and add visibility hidden back to this. So when we refresh, it should just not be there. Fantastic. Now what we're going to do is go into the JavaScript, and like I said, we're going to sort of set the position of it with JavaScript, and while we're there, we might as well go ahead and make it visible at the same time. So we're going to create a function called set position for weather info. Set position for weather info. Great. Let weather container equal document.get element by ID, and the ID is weather container, and then grab the let weather container height. We're going to use weather container here, and we're going to say weather container dot client height, and that's just going to be a number. Let's see, so got to put an equal sign there. So that's going to be a number, and it's not going to have the little pixels thing at the end, so we're going to have to make sure that we add that in a minute. Let weather container width equal, it's going to be the exact same thing, but client width instead of client height, so just replace height with width here. Okay, so what we want to do is set the weather container dot style dot left, and inside of these quotes we can actually put CSS, and it's going to put the style it's going to set the style equal to whatever we put inside the CSS. Well, what we want to do is we want it to be centered horizontally, so we want to set the left equal to basically 50% minus half of the width of the element. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to use the CSS calc function, and then in here we're going to let's actually, instead of using the single quotes, let's again use the backticks. It's just so much more convenient. So we're going to say 50% minus, and then put your $sign and your 2 curly braces, and we're going to say weather container width divided by 2, and save that. And let's go ahead and set the style dot top as well. Put your 2 backticks there. We're going to use the calc as well, and then we're going to want to say 50% minus, put your $sign and your 2 curly braces, and we're going to say weather container height. Now instead of doing divided by 2 here, this is just a preference thing. You could do that and it would be centered perfectly vertically. But what I want to do instead is I actually want to divide it by 1.3 instead, so that it's just a little bit higher up than the center, because to me it just looks better that way. And then once we do that, let's go ahead and say weather container dot style dot visibility. Let's go ahead and set that to visible. Now we want to call this function that we just created whenever we search. So let's put it at the end of the where's a good place to put it? Let's actually put it at the end of the init function, since we call search and then it then calls init, and let's put it at the very end of the search function, because at that point we already have everything we need, and the width and the height of the weather container will already be computed by this point, so we will already have all of the stuff that we need. So let's go ahead and call set position for weather info at the very bottom of the init function. Save that, let's see if it works. Refresh your page, type in Portland or whatever city you'd like, click search, and it does not quite work, so we're missing something simple. Let's figure out what that is. So if I click inspect and I go to the console, we don't have any errors. I wonder, let's see, set position for weather info, weather container.style.left. Oh, that's what it is. See guys, I forgot. We have to add pixels at the end because it gives you just a number. We have to add pixels here, just like that. So let's try this again. Portland, click search, perfect. So let's type in New York, search, looks great. All right, so there it is guys, that is the app. So this was a really quick run through of how to use a basic use of an API in an app. This was the first tutorial that I've done with an API. And I wanted to do this so that you guys could kind of get familiar with the use of how you want to sort of call an API, how it returns information, you convert it to JSON, and then you use that JSON to populate what you want. You can use that data for whatever you want inside the application. And we went over things such as the app ID here, which every time you use a public API, you're almost always going to get an ID. And the reason why you get an ID is because they don't want just anybody going out there and just sending millions of requests to their API. See, what they can do is they can take this API key, and if you're sending a million requests, they can stop accepting requests from your app ID. And it just gives them greater control. And so that's basic ideas of how to use an API in a web application. All right, guys, if you liked this, please subscribe, please share this video, please give me a like. It helps me out a lot. I'm going to continue making these tutorials, and I'm actually going to be including a Patreon link this time because it was actually requested of me in a previous video to do this. I really thank you. You guys have a great day.